I started this probably in the late 60s, early 70s. Started putting them in these jugs, to the point that now I have acquired 15 water jugs.
When Otha Anders walked through the double glass doors of Ruston's downtown bank, the sound of his footsteps echoed off the shiny marble floor. The usual quiet hum of the bank, people chatting softly, keyboards clicking, suddenly faded as a sharp metallic clink broke the air. Otha was pushing a dolly piled high with bulky 5-gallon jugs, and every wheel squeaked loudly with each step forward. Heads turned, conversations paused. The bank lobby fell into a strange silence. All eyes locked onto what he was wheeling in. The plastic jugs were packed full, nearly overflowing with pennies, thousands of them. You could see their dull copper glow through the sides of the containers. Otha, who was well known around Ruston for his longtime role on the Jackson School Board, had always been seen as a steady, old-school kind of guy. But this, bringing in that many pennies, no one quite knew what to make of it. Jenny Cole, the bank's vice president, looked confused as Otha reached the front, her eyebrows raised. "Mr. Anders, what in the world have you brought with you today?" she asked, both curious and stunned. Otha gave her a tired but amused smile. 45 years of pennies, he said. Figured it was time to find out what I've got here. People started whispering and inching closer, trying to get a look. There was a strange kind of energy building, like something unexpected was about to happen. It didn't feel like a normal day at the bank anymore. It felt like the start of a story everyone would be talking about. The whole thing had begun with just one penny Otha noticed on the sidewalk nearly 50 years ago. He'd picked it up and used it as a small reminder to pause, say a quiet prayer, and be thankful. That one moment turned into a habit, an odd little routine that even his family didn't fully get. At first, his wife and kids thought it was sweet in a quirky way. They'd laugh about it during dinner or whenever someone spotted him scooping up another coin. But over time, Otha's collection started to take on a life of its own. What started as a single jar turned into a whole shelf full. Then came the buckets, and eventually 15 huge 5-gallon water jugs that ended up taking over nearly half of their garage. The number of coins seemed to multiply faster than anyone could count. And before long, it wasn't just a harmless quirk, it became something the family had to talk about. His wife Martha started bringing it up more often. "Otha, you've got to stop with all these pennies," she'd say, glancing over at the rows of containers and shaking her head. "We're running out of space, and you're spending more time sorting coins than doing anything else." Their kids were just as confused by the whole thing. As teenagers, they'd groan when they saw him crouch down outside a store, picking up another dirty coin. "Come on, Dad." "Do you really need another penny?" they'd say. "It's just 1 cent. But Otha would simply smile, slip the coin into his pocket, and keep going. "It's not just a penny," he'd say. "It's a reminder." What once made the family laugh now started to worry them. The conversations got more serious as the years passed, especially as Otha's focus on his penny collection seemed to grow even stronger. Martha often said he was getting too caught up in it, spending weekends with coin jars instead of fixing the fence or just taking it easy. Their kids, now grown up, started questioning whether any of it was even worth the time. It all felt like too much. "You're just sitting on a pile of copper, Dad," his son Jeffrey said one day, shaking his head. "They're not rare or anything. They're just plain old pennies." But Otha didn't see them that way. To him, every single penny stood for something more. A small moment of gratitude, a symbol of patience, a quiet kind of hope. He'd never collected them for their price. It was about the habit, the mindset, the little reminders to stay grounded and thankful. Still, as more and more jugs filled up and space got tighter, even Otha had to admit things were getting a bit out of hand. Now and then, the family would nudge him to let some of it go. "You could actually do something useful with that money," Martha would say. Fix something around the house, take a little trip, or give some of it to someone who needs it. But Otha always held back. Letting go of even one coin felt like breaking a promise he'd made to himself years ago. Deep down, he believed that one day his quiet dedication would mean something, though he had no idea when or how. For years, those jugs just sat there, gathering dust in the garage, a quiet sign of Otha's stubborn dedication. His family learned to step around them without thinking, though the topic still came up every now and then, usually with a laugh or a half-joking complaint. But as Otha got older, Martha's worries started to carry more weight. What would happen to all those pennies when he was gone? Who'd be stuck figuring out what to do with this strange legacy he'd built over decades? But Otha never budged. To him, the collection meant something deeply personal. It was proof that even the smallest things, over time, could grow into something meaningful. He never said much about it, though, not even to Martha or the kids. No one really knew just how many coins he'd gathered. They had no clue that sitting in the garage, quietly tucked away, was a small fortune hiding in plain sight. The moment came when he finally had no choice but to cash them in, after learning that his home insurance wouldn't cover the collection anymore. That changed everything, not just for Otha, but for the whole family. As he rolled the dolly toward the bank that day, weighed down with those 5-gallon jugs, he could almost hear Martha's voice in his head, half teasing, half serious. "I hope all those pennies were worth it." She had no idea. When Otha Anders pushed the dolly up to the counter, the reaction from the bank staff was exactly what you'd expect. Wide eyes, surprised looks, and the kind of glances people exchange when they're not quite sure what they're seeing. They'd had people bring in coins before, sure, but not like this. This was something else entirely. Jenny Cole happened to be standing at the front desk as Otha approached. She'd known him for years. He was one of those friendly, familiar faces always coming by for regular banking. But this was a side of Otha she hadn't seen. The stack of jugs was almost unbelievable. Jenny found herself staring, trying to guess just how many coins could possibly be packed in there. The dolly gave one last squeak as it came to a stop in front of her. "Well, Mr. Anders," Jenny said, raising an eyebrow with clear curiosity, "I've seen all kinds of things walk through these doors, but I've never seen anything quite like this. Just how many pennies are we talking about here?" Otha gave a small, polite smile, the kind of smile that comes from years of quiet preparation. "Can't say for sure," he replied, "but I'd guess somewhere close to 500,000. Give or take, 500,000. The number didn't even sound real. Jenny blinked, caught off guard for a second before she quickly pulled herself back into her usual professional mode. But even then, a hint of doubt stayed in her eyes. Otha's calm presence and friendly tone didn't exactly match the massive scale of what he was asking. "You've been collecting these for how long?" she asked, sounding more surprised the second time around. 45 years, Otha said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Picked up every penny I saw. Never spent a single one." It wasn't just the number that left Jenny and the others unsettled. It was the thought of someone spending decades collecting something most people ignore. To the staff, pennies barely registered, just small change people dropped, forgot, or tossed in tip jars without thinking. The idea that one man had saved enough to fill 15 huge jugs? It was hard to believe. Steve, the assistant manager, made his way over after hearing the buzz around the room. He glanced over the jugs stacked on the dolly, his mouth tightening as he took it all in. "We're not really set up for this kind of deposit," he said, folding his arms. "Our machines might not even be able to take this much at once. It could take days just to get through them." The hesitation in his voice was clear, and the tellers nearby exchanged uneasy looks. Handling a few coin rolls was one thing, but this was on a whole different level. The thought of their machines jamming or having to count hundreds of thousands of pennies by hand made everyone shift a little in place. But Otha didn't flinch. He was used to people doubting the value of his collection. His own family had raised eyebrows for years, so this wasn't anything new. "I'm not in a hurry," he said with a nod. "I've waited 45 years to see what all this adds up to. If it takes a few hours or a few days, I can wait." The tellers glanced at each other, a quiet tension passing between them. None of them were exactly excited to deal with such a massive coin deposit, but no one wanted to turn away Otha Anders either. He'd been a regular at the bank for years. Jenny, sensing the hesitation growing, stepped in to ease the moment. "We'll figure something out, Mr. Anders," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's just, this is a bit more than we expected." The team got to work, realizing it was going to be a long day. They pulled out the old coin-counting machines, dusting them off and plugging them in. But even as they got started, doubts lingered. Steve, still uneasy, couldn't help but wonder if this whole thing was a waste of time. Who spends 45 years collecting pennies? There had to be better ways to use all that effort. They began with the first jug, breaking it open carefully with a hammer. Pennies poured out in a steady stream, scattering across the table in a wash of copper. As they fed the coins into the machine, the sound of metal clinking and whirring filled the room, but the machine was slower than expected. By the middle of the day, only a few jugs had been emptied, and the teller's earlier disbelief had turned into a quiet sort of endurance. Even so, something started to shift. Despite the long hours, there was a growing curiosity. Otha stayed calm, waiting patiently, never pushing anyone or complaining. His steady presence and the sheer scale of what he'd brought in began to earn quiet respect from the staff. More employees started to gather nearby, drawn in by the unusual scene. "You never know," one teller whispered. "There might be something rare in there. People find valuable coins all the time." The soft clinking of coins filled the room like a rhythm, steady and almost calming. Jug after jug was opened, the process slow but constant. What had started as skepticism slowly turned into something else. A sense that maybe this wasn't just some strange obsession. Maybe there was more to it. Otha chatted with the tellers as they worked. Many were curious about how his collection started, and he was glad to share. He told them about the rainy day he found nearly 50 pennies scattered across the high school parking lot, and how he'd often find coins wedged in the cracks of the old bleachers during school games. He talked about how he started sorting them by year and type once he had learned some older coins might be worth more. He even shared how students would bring him pennies they found on the playground, and how he always insisted on giving them a penny back in return. As the counting continued, the tellers began to notice some coins that looked much older, many marked with dates from the 1930s and 40s, and even a few from the early 1900s. Seeing those worn pennies with their faded designs and soft edges gave them a different kind of meaning. The stories Otha shared made each coin feel more like a memory than money. And slowly, the staff started to understand why he'd kept them all these years. They had made it through about half the jugs when the steady hum of the machine suddenly stopped. A deep grinding sound filled the room, and then everything went quiet. Steve rushed over, worry written all over his face. He leaned down and peered inside. "Looks like some of the old coins jammed the rollers," he said. "A few are so worn they're almost flat." Jenny glanced at Otha, her brow furrowed. He stood nearby, watching with a quiet, uneasy expression. "I think we'll need to go through some of these by hand," she told him gently. "It's going to take a lot longer than we planned." Otha let out a slow breath and nodded, his shoulders dropping just a bit. "That's okay," he said softly. "I've waited this long." From there, the team switched gears. Some tellers began sorting coins by hand, while others tried using smaller machines that could handle the more delicate coins. As they sifted through the piles, a few surprises started to pop up. One teller, Susan, spotted a coin that stood out. She picked it up carefully and squinted at the date, 1943. Unlike the usual gray steel pennies from that year, this one had a reddish tone. "This could be a copper 1943 penny," she said, excitement rising in her voice as she walked it over to Steve and Jenny. "If it's real, this one alone might be worth thousands." The room lit up with interest. Staff gathered closer, curious and buzzing with conversation. Othos stayed modest, trying not to make a big deal out of it. "It's still just a penny," he said with a small smile. "But hey, I'll take any little blessing that comes my way." By the end of the second day, the sorting and counting were finally done. Every last penny had been run through the machines, weighed, and totaled up. Otho stood quietly as Steve, the assistant manager, approached him with a small slip of paper in hand and a look of disbelief on his face. "Mr. Anders," Steve said, pausing with a grin, "your total comes to $5,136.14. You really did have just over 500,000 pennies." For a second, the room went completely still. Then a soft round of applause broke out from the group of staff and curious onlookers nearby. Otho didn't say much, but the smile on his face said everything. The number was more than he had hoped for, but even more important than the money was the feeling that all those years of quiet effort had truly meant something. And then, just when he thought the story had ended, something else came along. A few mornings later, Otho got a phone call from Susan, the teller who had found that unusual 1940s penny. She'd gone out of her way to contact an antique coin expert just to find out more. What she learned was pretty amazing. Because that penny was from a rare World War II batch, it was worth much more than expected. In fact, it earned Otho a few extra $1,000s. He was stunned. One of the first things he did with the money was pay off a dental bill he'd been putting off for months. After that, he surprised Martha with a trip to the Gulf Coast, something they had always dreamed of but never quite got around to. The rest he quietly donated to their local community, happy to give back to a place that had supported him for so long. From that point on, Otho became a bit of a local legend. People knew him as the Penny Man, a symbol of how patience, gratitude, and a steady heart could turn something small into something meaningful. He may have cashed in the coins, but the story lived on. His journey became a reminder that even the tiniest things in life can add up in ways we don't expect. What a heartwarming story, and a pretty surprising payout in the end. Could you imagine saving something for 45 years? What did you think his total would be? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.